After the American colonies won independence from Great Britain in 1783, the victory raised an urgent and complicated question. Now what? They had broken free from a king, but they didn't yet have a nation. There were no national courts, no executive leader, and no real plan. What the United States did have was 13 separate colonies, each with its own government, its own currency, its own interests. These former colonies had become independent states, and they were cautious, even afraid of handing over power to a new national government. Their solution? The Articles of Confederation, America's first attempt at government. But the Articles were more like a loose agreement between friends than a real system of governance. The federal government had almost no authority. It couldn't tax. It couldn't raise an army. It couldn't even regulate trade between states. All it could really do was request money from the states, and most of the time, the states just ignored those requests. It didn't take long for problems to appear. The new country had war debts and no way to pay them. Soldiers hadn't received their salaries. Trade was a mess. States were printing their own money and arguing over borders. Tensions between states grew while the federal government stood powerless. In 1786, those tensions exploded into violence during Shays' Rebellion, when armed farmers in Massachusetts, angry over taxes and debt, took up arms against the government. The rebellion terrified the nation's leaders. If the government couldn't stop a few hundred angry farmers, how could it possibly defend the entire country? Something had to change. The country was on the edge of collapse. In 1787, leaders from 12 of the 13 states met in Philadelphia. Their original goal was to fix the Articles of Confederation. But soon, it became clear that the Articles weren't just flawed, they were broken beyond repair. What followed was the Constitutional Convention, one of the most important events in American history. Inside the hot, stuffy hall of Independence Hall, 55 delegates, many of whom were lawyers, soldiers, farmers, and philosophers, debated how to build a government strong enough to hold the country together but limited enough to avoid becoming a tyranny. They didn't want another king. They didn't want unchecked power. What they wanted was balance. And out of that desire came one of the most brilliant ideas in modern political history: separation of powers. Rather than concentrate power in the hands of one group or one person, the delegates chose to divide it into three branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Each branch would have its own duties, its own powers, and its own ability to keep the other two in check. That structure would become the foundation of the U.S. Constitution. The legislative branch would be the branch that creates laws. It would be made up of a Congress with two chambers: the House of Representatives, which gives more power to states with larger populations, and the Senate, where every state gets equal representation, 2 senators each. This design was a compromise between the big states and the small states. The House would speak for the people. The Senate would speak for the states. Congress wouldn't just make laws. It would also control the budget, declare war, approve treaties, and have the power to remove presidents and judges through impeachment. It would be the most direct expression of the people's voice, but it wouldn't act alone. Next came the executive branch, led by a single president of the United States. The president would be responsible for enforcing the laws passed by Congress, leading the military, managing foreign relations, and ensuring the daily operation of the government. But the president's power wasn't unlimited. To prevent tyranny, the president could be impeached by Congress. Treaties and major appointments like federal judges would require Senate approval. And while the president could veto laws passed by Congress, Congress could override that veto with enough votes. This wasn't a king. This was a chief executive held in check by the system itself. The third branch was the judicial branch, the system of federal courts led by the Supreme Court. Their role was to interpret the law and ensure it followed the Constitution. If a law passed by Congress or an order signed by the president violated the Constitution, the courts could strike it down. This power, called judicial review, wasn't explicitly written into the Constitution, but became an accepted part of the system after the 1803 case Marbury v. Madison. Since then, The courts have served as a guardian of constitutional rights, especially when other branches overstep their boundaries. The entire system works because of checks and balances. Congress makes laws, but the president can veto them. The president can appoint judges, but the Senate must approve them. The courts can block laws or executive actions, but judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by Congress. This back and forth is not a flaw, it's the system working as it was designed. The founders didn't invent this concept from scratch. They drew ideas from philosophers like John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu, who believed that government must be divided to prevent corruption. They studied ancient Rome, British law, and colonial governments to find what worked and what didn't. But the Constitution they wrote in 1787 wasn't perfect. At the time, it only represented a fraction of the people. Women had no vote. Enslaved people were treated as property. Native Americans were excluded. Only land-owning white men could truly participate in government. Over time, that would change thanks to amendments, movements, protests, and the tireless work of citizens who demanded a voice. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th guaranteed equal protection. The 15th gave voting rights to black men. And the 19th gave voting rights to women. These changes didn't come easily, but they made the promise of the Constitution more real for more people. More than 230 years later, the three branches still define the U.S. government. They've survived wars, economic collapses, assassinations, resignations, scandals, and protests. There have been moments when the system bent under pressure, but it has never broken. That's because it was designed with one clear principle: power must be shared. It's a system that forces leaders to compromise, a system that prevents one person from holding all the keys, a system where the law, not any one leader, is the final authority. The United States isn't perfect. No system is. But by dividing the government into three branches, the Founding Fathers gave the country something stronger than a king or a crown. They gave it a structure that protects freedom, limits abuse, and gives every citizen a voice. And that's how the U.S. government was divided, not by force, not by accident, but by vision. A vision that still shapes the nation today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, drop a comment below, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing content. Thanks for watching.